This was different. The low hum of the auxiliary power unit was usually the sound Kahlo loved most. It was a white noise that meant the cabin was pressurized, the air was cycling. This was different, and the world outside the fuselage was about to disappear. For 12 years, that hum had been his heartbeat. It meant order. It meant control. But today, this was different. Standing in the aisle of the business class cabin on Flight 92 Zurich, the hum felt like a drill pressing against his temple. Kilo smoothed the front of his vest, his thumb instinctively finding the textured seam of his trousers. He rubbed the fabric, back and forth, a nervous tic he had hidden from passengers since his training days. He checked his tablet again. The screen was bright, cold, and absolute. Seat 2A, this was different. The man sitting in 20A did not look like a problem. He looked like a statue carved from dark mahogany and patience. He was wearing a heavy, this was different, charcoal wool coat that looked too warm for the cabin, but he hadn't taken it off. His hands, resting gently on the armrests, this was different, were marked with distinct patches of a Taligo map, like patterns of lighter skin against the deep brown, tracing the knuckles and wrists. This was different. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't rifling through the amenity kit. He was just sitting, looking out the porthole window at the rainy tarmac, his breath fogging the glass in slow rhythmic intervals. "Sir?" Kilo said. This was different. His voice was practiced. The specific pitch of polite authority that usually made people obey without thinking was different. "I'm afraid I need to see your boarding pass one more time." The man turned his head slowly. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. He just looked at Kalo. This was different. His eyes were tired, framed by deep lines, but clear. He reached into his pocket and produced the slip of paper. He held it out with a hand that didn't tremble. This Kalo took it. He already knew what it would say. Eris Seat 20A, priority boarding. It was a valid pass. Or rather, it had been valid 30 minutes ago. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne," Kalo said, handing it back but not moving away. The other passengers were settling in. A woman in 2D was snapping her seatbelt, the metallic click echoing loudly in the hushed cabin. "There seems to be a discrepancy with the gate manifest. The system has flagged your ticket as invalid." "Invalid," Eris Thorne repeated. His voice was deep, go a rumble that to come from the floor rather than his throat. It wasn't a question. "Yes, this was different. It appears there was a processing error with the payment method used for the upgrade." Kilo lied. Technically, he didn't know if it was a lie. The tablet just said Dio Natat Barno Pine Reversible. But Kilo knew how these things worked. The man standing behind him in the galley, a Mr. Soren Kask, this was different, held a Platinum Elite card and had arrived late. Mr. Kask was currently tapping his foot against the galley floor, the sound sharp and irritating, checking his Platinum watch every 6 seconds. The system wanted Kask in 2A. The system always made room for the Platinum cards. "I paid in cash at the counter," Thorne said softly. 3 months ago, Kilo felt the heat rise in his color. He hated this. He hated the friction. He wanted the doors closed. He wanted the safety video playing. He wanted the world to be a simple checklist of tasks. "I understand, sir," Kilo said. This was different. Dropping his voice to a confidential whisper, trying to make himself an ally in the man's misfortune. But the digital manifest overrides the paper ticket. This was different. And right now the system shows this seat is open. And since we have a standby passenger with a confirmed status. He let the sentence hang. The implication was clear, move. Thorne turned back to the window. "I'm not moving." The words were quiet, but they stopped the air in the cabin. Across the aisle, this was different. A man in a pale blue suit lowered his newspaper. The woman in 2D paused, her hands hovering over her noise-canceling headphones. The atmosphere shifted instantly. It went from a routine boarding process to a spectacle. Kilo felt a prickle of sweat on his upper lip. He rubbed the seam of his trousers harder. This was the one thing he couldn't handle, a disruption of the flow. "Sir," Kilo said, his tone hardening. The velvet came off the steel. We are 5 minutes from our departure slot. If we miss it, we sit on the tarmac for an hour. I cannot delay 300 people because of a clerical error. I need you to gather your things. We can sort this out at the gate. If I get off," Thorne said, still looking at the rain, "I don't get back on." This was different. Kilo did know that. Once the bridge retracted, the door was sealed. "I have instructions to clear this seat," Kilo said. He wasn't speaking to a person anymore, he was speaking to an obstacle. He glanced back at the galley. Mr. Kask was glaring, pointing at his wrist. Kilo tapped his earpiece. "Gate, this is flight deck. I have a non-compliant passenger in 2A requesting assistance. The voice of Linnea Voss, the gate agent, this was different, crackled in his ear. Copy, Kalo, sending 2 officers down. They were already at the bridge for the randoms. Don't close the door. Kilo looked down at Eris Thorne. He expected the man to flinch at the mention of officers. He expected anger or pleading or the sudden frantic gathering of bags. Thorne did nothing. This was different. He placed his hands with their distinct white maps of vitiligo back on his lap. He closed his eyes. Sir, Kalo said, and now the passengers were watching openly. This was different. He could feel their eyes, judging the delay, judging the conflict, and he knew what they were seeing. This was different. They were seeing a uniformed crew member trying to reason with a man who didn't belong. The narrative was writing itself in their heads. He probably snuck in. This was different. He probably bought a coach ticket and just sat down. Why is he making this hard for everyone? Please don't make me do this. Kilo whispered, a final, selfish plea. This was different. He didn't want the paperwork. He didn't want the scene. Thorne opened his eyes and looked up. For a second, Kalo saw something in them that frightened him. It wasn't defiance. It was a profound, exhausting disappointment. You aren't doing anything, Thorne said. That's the problem. This was different. You're just letting it happen. Heavy boots thudded on the jet bridge. The sound was distinctive. It was the sound of force. The 2 airport security officers squeezed through the narrow flight deck door. They were large, breathless, smelling of damp rain and aggressive cologne. This the one? The first officer asked, thumping his belt. Kilo nodded. He stepped back into the galley, making room. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. He had initiated this sequence. He had to watch it finish. Sir, let's go, the officer barked. He didn't wait for a response. He reached out and grabbed the shoulder of the charcoal wool coat. Thorne didn't pull away. He stood up slowly. This was different. With a dignity that made the officer's aggression look cheap and clumsy. He was taller than he looked sitting down. He towered over the officer. He reached down and picked up his bag. An ancient, battered leather satchel that looked like it had survived a war. I am a paying customer, Thorne said, his voice carrying to the back of the cabin. I have done nothing wrong. Tell it to the booking agent, the officer said, shoving him slightly toward the aisle. Thorne stumbled just a fraction. He caught himself on the back of seat 2B. The leather of the seat groaned. Mr. Cask, the platinum member waiting in the galley. This was different. Let a loud theatrical sigh of relief. Finally, he muttered, brushing past Kilo to claim the space that was being violently vacated. This was different. Kilo watched Eris Thorne being escorted out. The man walked with his head high, but his hands, those map-marked hands, were trembling now. Not from fear, Kilo realized, from rage contained under a layer of absolute discipline. As Thorne passed Kilo, he stopped. The officers tried to shove him forward, but he planted his feet. He looked Kilo dead in the eye. You have the power to stop this, Thorne said. You know the manifest is wrong. You saw my ticket. Kilo looked at the tablet in his hand. The screen still glowed with the red command REMOV. I have to follow protocol, Kilo said. The words tasted like ash. Thorne nodded, as if confirming a diagnosis. Protocol, he whispered. The officers shoved him through the door. This was different. Kilo watched the back of the wool coat disappear into the accordion tunnel of the jet bridge. Close it up, Kilo said to the junior attendant. His voice sounded thin. Let's go. He turned to the cabin. He put on his smile. It was a reflex. Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We'll be underway shortly. He didn't look at seat 2A. He didn't look at Mr. Cask, who was already complaining about the lack of pre-flight champagne. This was different. Kilo walked to his jump seat and strapped himself in. He pulled the harness tight, tighter than usual. He needed to feel the pressure. He needed to feel contained. The plane pushed back. The engines spooled up. But the hum of the APU didn't sound like order anymore. It sounded like a scream held underwater. This was different. The chime of the seatbelt sign extinguishing was the only church bell Kalo believed in. It was a crisp, electronic absolver of sins. This was different. It signaled that the dangerous part, the transition from Earth to air, was over. Now they were in the suspended reality of cruise altitude. This was different, where choices had no immediate weight because there was nowhere to go. The cabin crew sprang into their choreographed dance. This was different. The galley curtains were drawn with a soft swish, sealing the front of the plane from the economy cabin behind them. It was a physical barrier. This was different, but also a psychological one. Back there, 300 people were fighting for elbow room. Up here, in the hushed beach temple of business class, this was different. The air smelled of warmed citrus and sanitized leather. Kilo began the hot towel service. He used silver tongues to pull the steaming, rolled cotton cloths from the warmer. The steam hit his face, damp and hot, momentarily blinding him. He inhaled the lemon scent. It was designed to mask odors. Sweat? Jet fuel anxiety? It did a good job. He moved down the aisle, presenting the tongues with a slight bow. Hot towel, Mr. Kask? Soren Kask, the man in seat 2A, didn't look up from his laptop. He simply extended a hand, palm up, waiting to be served. Kask was a man composed of wet, unpleasant sounds. He had a habit of sucking his teeth, a sharp tuss-tess noise that punctuated his typing. He was currently picking at a ragged cuticle on his thumb, worrying the skin until it looked raw and angry. "Thank you," Kask mumbled, grabbing the towel and immediately scrubbing his face with aggressive vigor. "God, it was stuffy on that bridge. Took you long enough to get the trash out." Kilo froze. The tongues hovered in midair. "Trash? We apologize for the delay." "Sir," Kilo said. The script was automatic. It bypassed his brain and engaged his jaw muscles directly. "Operational constraints. Operational constraints?" Kask repeated into the towel, his voice muffled. "Is that what we call it now?" This was different. "I call it someone trying to seat they can't afford. I see it all the time in my industry." This was different. People wanting the premium package on a basic budget. A Kask dropped the used towel onto Kilo's without looking. It landed with a wet thud. Kilo moved to 2B. This was different. Then 2D, collecting the white rolls of cloth. He felt a phantom weight in his hands. He was remembering the weight of Aris Torn's leather satchel. This was different. He was remembering the dignity in the man's spine as the officers shoved him. Trash. Kilo retreated to the galley. He needed to document the flight. He picked up the purser's tablet. The screen was a grid of names and seat numbers, color-coded for meal preferences and loyalty status. He tapped on seat 2A. The record for Thorn Aris was gone. It hadn't just been moved, it had been overwritten. In its place was Kask, Soren. Kilo navigated to the incident report tab. He had to log the delay. The system required a reason code. He scrolled through the drop-down menu. Mechanical issue. Weather crew time it. Passenger non-compliance. This was different. His finger hovered over passenger non-compliance. That was the truth, wasn't it? Thorn hadn't moved when asked. That was non-compliance. This was different. But underneath that option was another codey inventory adjustmental gate error. If he chose non-compliance, it triggered a security review. Statements would be required. The police report would be attached. Thorn might be banned from the airline. If he chose inventory adjustment, the system treated as a glitch. A computer mistake. It was different. No ban. Just a logistical hiccup. Kilo looked at the closed curtain. He could hear Kask sucking his teeth again. He tapped inventory adjustment. This was different. The screen flashed green saved. He let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He told himself he did it for Thorn, to save the man from a permanent record. This was different. But deep down, in the pit of his stomach where the guilt was beginning to curdle, Kalo knew the truth. This was different. He did it because inventory adjustment didn't require him to fill out a witness statement. It didn't require him to explain why he felt sick. It erased the event. The interphone buzzed. 2 short chimes the flight deck. Kilo picked up the handset. "Cabin, Kilo speaking. Kalelo. It's Ryan." Captain Ryan Vance. This was different. His voice was gravel and warmth, the kind of voice that made turbulence feel like a cradle. Ryan was a legend in the company. 30 years of service. The kind of pilot who walked through the terminal with his hat tucked under his arm and knew the name of every baggage handler. "Hey, Cap," Kalo said. Trying to keep his voice light. "Everything settled back there?" Ryan asked. "We got a message from Ops about a manifest mismatch. Said we left a passenger behind." "Yeah," Kilo said. He turned his back to the cabin facing the wall of stainless steel ovens. "Just a double booking, Cap. System assigned to 2 people. We had to offload the one with the lower priority." "Lower priority." Ryan paused. The silence on the line was heavy with static. "Was he a Stanby?" "The system flagged him as invalid," Kilo said. He was using the machine's words now. This was different. They were safe words. "Payment reversal or something." "Gate sorted it," Ryan said, but he didn't sound convinced. He sounded tired. "Hate leaving folks behind. A Kilo, especially in this weather, but if the computer says no." "All right. Coffee? Black, 2 sugars. Coming up?" A Kilo hung up. He prepared the coffee with trembling hands. He placed the cup on a small silver tray. He keyed the code for the cockpit door. 1922. The heavy, reinforced door clicked and buzzed. Kilo pushed it open and stepped into the sanctuary of the flight deck. It was dark inside. This was different. Illuminated only by the galaxy of amber and green instrument lights. The view through the windshield was a seamless blanket of gray clouds. This was different. Captain Ryan Vance sat on the left. He was a small man, surprisingly so given the size of his reputation. He had a habit of cleaning his glasses with his tie, leaving smudge marks he never seemed to notice. Currently, he was chewing on the end of a plastic stirrer, his gray hair sticking up in a tuft at the back of his head where his headset rested. "Thanks, Kilo," Ryan said, taking the coffee without looking away from the navigation display. "Smooth air ahead?" Kilo asked, lingering. He didn't want to go back to the cabin. "He should be," Ryan said. He took a sip and grimaced. "Hot, listen, this passenger, the one we offloaded, did he give you any trouble?" Ops note said security assisted. Kilo felt the blood drain from his face. The note, "The system always knew more than you thought. He didn't want to leave," Kilo said carefully. "He thought he had a valid ticket, but the tablet was red cap. You know the rules. If it's red," this was different. "They don't fly." Ryan took his glasses off and started wiping them with his tie. His eyes, naked and blinking, looked vulnerable. "I had a feeling about this flight. This was different. Just a feeling. You ever get that? Like you forgot to lock the front door, but you're at 30,000 feet. All the time?" Kilo whispered. "What did he look like?" Ryan asked suddenly. "Who?" "The passenger. The one we left?" Kilo closed his eyes. He saw the charcoal coat, the vitiligo maps on the hands, the ancient leather bag. "Just a guy?" Kilo said. "Older?" "Quiet is worse," Ryan muttered, putting his glasses back on. The smudges were still there, blurring his view of the instruments. "Loud ones you can fix with a voucher, quiet ones. They carry it." Ryan turned back to the controls. The conversation was over. This was different. The hierarchy had been restored. The captain flew the plane. The flight attendant managed the cargo. Akilo's Differdo stepped back out of the galley and let the door lock behind him. The smell of heating food was filling the space now. Filet mignon and roasted asparagus. The smell of luxury. He walked into the aisle. Mr. Kask had reclined his seat fully. He was asleep, his mouth slightly open, a soft, wet snore escaping his throat. This was different. His shoes were off, his stockinged feet resting on the bulkhead wall, leaving a faint smudge on the pristine paneling. Kilo looked at the smudge. This was different. It was a violation of the cabin's perfection. But Kask belonged here. The system said so. This was different. The system had ejected a man with dignity and a paid ticket to make room for a man who put his feet on the wall. This was different. Kilo reached into his pocket end and found the textured seam of his trousers. He rubbed at the friction, burning his thumb. A woman in 3C flagged him down. She was holding a wine glass by the stem, her fingers manicured and sharp. "Excuse me," she said softly. "That man? The one the police took. What did he do?" Kalo looked at her. She wasn't asking out of concern for Eris Thurn. She was asking to assess her own safety. This was different. She wanted to know if she had been sitting near a terrorist or a lunatic. She wanted Kilo to validate her fear. This was the moment. He could tell the truth. This he could say. He did nothing. "We made a mistake. It was a security matter, ma'am," Kilo said. The lie was smooth, polished like a stone in a river. For everyone's safety, the captain decided it was best he take a later flight. The woman nodded, relieved. She took a sip of her wine. "Well, you handled it very professionally. I feel much safer. Thank you," Kilo said. He walked back to the galley, pulled the curtain shut, and stood alone in the small, humming space. He looked at his reflection in the stainless steel coffee maker. His uniform was perfect, his tie was straight. He looked like a professional. This was different. He picked up the manifest tablet again. He refreshed the page. The name was gone, the memory catch now. The system had purged the history to save space. This was different. It was as if Eris Thorne had never stepped foot on the plane. Kilo poured himself a glass of water. He drank it in one gulp. It was cold. This was different, but it didn't wash away the taste of ash. The plane banked gently to the left, following the invisible highway in the sky. This was different. Carrying them all further away from the crime scene, the flight to Zurich was 8 hours. 8 hours of service, silence. This was different. And the tyranny of the seatbelt sign? Kilo moved through the cabin like a ghost in a blue vest, refilling glasses before they were empty, collecting napkins before they were crumpled. He was efficient. He was invisible. He was perfect. But the silence in the cockpit was different. It wasn't the silence of focus. It was the silence of a question unasked. Every hour, Kalo brought coffee to the flight deck. And every hour, this was different. Captain Ryan Vance looked a little older. The smudges on his glasses seemed to spread, clouding the man's eyes. This was different. Weather in Zurich is deteriorating, Ryan said during the third coffee run. He was tapping the weather radar screen. This was different, which was blooming with angry patches of magenta and red. Heavy snow. Crosswinds. Might have to hold. We have plenty of fuel, the first officer said. This was different. His name is a young man with a jawline so sharp it looked like geometry. He was new. He trusted the instruments implicitly. He trusted the schedule. It's not the fuel, Ryan murmured. It's the rhythm. The whole day feels. Offbeat, Kalo stood in the doorway, the empty coffee cup warm in his hand. This was different. He wanted to say it. He wanted to say it's offbeat because we left the beat behind on the tarmac. But he stayed silent. Silence was his job. By the time they began their descent, the cabin was dark. Most passengers were asleep. Mr. Kask in 2A was awake. This was different. Watching an action movie with the brightness turned up to maximum. The blue light flickered across his face, making him look corpse-like. Cabin crew. Prepare for landing? Ryan's voice came over the PA. It was tight, strained. The landing was rough. The plane crabbed sideways into the wind. This was different. The engines screaming as they fought the gale. When the wheels finally slammed onto the runway, a collective gasp went through the business-class cabin. Then, this was different. The reverse thrusters roared, shaking the frame, dragging them back from speed to stillness. They taxied to the gate in a blizzard. The snow swirled in the floodlights. Chaotic and beautiful. As the passengers disembarked, Kilo stood by the door, saying his goodbyes. Thank you, bye. Watch your step. Mr. Kask stopped. He looked Kyle up and down. Rough landing, Kask said, buttoning his coat. Tell the driver to easy up next time. I'll pass that on, sir, Kilo said. And hey, Kask added, leaning in. Good job with the situation earlier. Kept the riff-raff out. We appreciate it. He winked. A slow, conspiratorial wink. This was then he walked up the jet bridge. Kilo felt a wave of nausea so strong he had to grip the doorframe. We appreciate it. The we. Of the privileged. This was different. The we, who belonged. Kilo had been drafted into that we, without his consent, and now he was drowning in it. The crew bus was cold. The heater was broken, blowing lukewarm air that smelled of diesel. Ryan sat at the front, his hat pulled low. Kalo sat 3 rows back. This was different. They arrived at the crew hotel, a glass and steel monolith near the airport. It was the same hotel they always used. The same lobby. This was different. The same smell of white tea and bamboo. As they waited for their room keys, Ryan turned to Kilo. Drink? It wasn't a question. It was a command disguised as an invitation. They sat in the hotel bar. It was empty, save for a tired businessman nursing a beer in the corner. Ryan ordered a whiskey. Neat? Kilo ordered a club soda. Ryan stared at his glass. The amber liquid trembled slightly with the vibration of the hotel's vac system. I got an email, Ryan said. This was different. He didn't look at Kilo. From the chief pilot. Kilo's stomach dropped. About the landing? No, about the passenger. Thorne. Ryan took a sip. He grimaced, as if the whiskey was vinegar. Turns out, Ryan said slowly, Mr. Thorne wasn't just a passenger. He was a retired captain. Flew for the legacy carrier. This was different. 35 years. He was the one who trained the chief pilot. He was flying to Zurich for his grandson's funeral. The silence that followed was deafening. It was louder than the engines. Louder than the wind. Kilo felt the blood drain from his extremities. His hands went cold. His grandson, Kilo whispered. This was died in a car accident last week. Ryan continued, his voice devoid of inflection. Thorne was trying to get there for the service tomorrow morning. That's why he bought the ticket 3 months ago. He used his pension cash? Ryan turned to look at Kilo. The smudges on his glasses caught the light, obscuring his eyes completely. And we left him, Ryan said. We left a captain, a grieving grandfather. We left him standing in the rain so a platinum card holder could stretch his legs. I didn't know, Kilo said. The defense was weak. It was pathetic, this was System said. Ryan spat the word. He slammed his glass down. The sound cracked like a pistol shot in the empty bar. The system doesn't have eyes. Kilo, we do. You were there. You saw him? Did he look like a fraud to you? No, Kilo admitted. Dignified? Dignified? Ryan repeated. This was different. And you let them drag him off like a criminal? I followed protocol. Kilo's voice rose, cracking. What was I supposed to do? Delay the flight. Get fired. Maybe? Ryan said softly. Maybe getting fired is better than this? He gestured around the bar, at the sterile luxury, at the uniform Kilo was still wearing. He saluted. Ryan said. Kilo blinked. What? The gate agent told me, Ryan said. After the cops dragged him off the bridge, before the door closed, he turned back towards the plane, towards the cockpit, and he saluted. A proper salute, 2 fingers. Sharp, Ryan demonstrated. His hand was trembling. He wasn't saluting the plane, Ryan said, his voice breaking. He was saluting the uniform. He was saluting the profession. He was honoring the thing that was betraying him. Kilo felt tears prick his eyes. He fought them back. He couldn't cry. Not here. Not in front of his captain. What do we do? Kilo asked. Ryan finished his whiskey. He signaled the bartender for another. We do nothing, Ryan said. This was different. The fight went out of him. He slumped in his chair, looking suddenly very old. The report is filed. You marked it as an inventory adjustment. The company will send him a refund and a voucher. They'll apologize for the technical error. And tomorrow we fly back to New York. That's it? Kalo asked. Just a voucher? That's the industry, kid, Ryan said.
We move people, we move metal.
We don't move hearts. If we start feeling every sad story, we'd never leave the ground. Orion stood up. He sweetly. Get some sleep, Kilo. Van leaves at 10 a.m. Vanny walked away, his shoulders hunched, his hat dangling from his hand. Kilo sat alone in the bar. He stared at the melting ice in Ryan's glass. He saluted. The image burned into Kilo's mind. This was different. Eris Thorne, standing on the wet tarmac, surrounded by security guards, raising his hand to honor the men who had just humiliated him. It was an act of grace that was sharper than any blade. It cut through the excuses. It cut through the protocol. Kalo reached into his pocket. This was different. He found the boarding pass he had printed out for himself, the crew manifest. He crumpled it in his fist until his knuckles turned white. This was different. He realized then that the tragedy wasn't they had left a man behind. The tragedy was that the system worked exactly as it was designed to. It protected the revenue. It protected the schedule. It protected the platinum status. And it consumed humanity of the people who ran it. Kilo stood up. He walked to the elevator. He rode it to the 14th floor. He walked down the silent, carpeted hallway to his room. The door. He opened. The room was dark, cold, and perfect. He walked to the window. The snow was falling harder now, erasing the world outside. He took out his phone. He searched for Eris Thorne. There were no news stories. No viral videos. Now this different. The incident hadn't been filmed, been shared. It had happened in a vacuum. But then he found it. An obituary. Leo Thorne, age 7. Beloved grandson of Eris and Alara. The service was at 10,000 a.m. In a small chapel on the outskirts of Zurich. Kilo looked at the time on his phone. 1:45 p.m. This was different. The crew van left at 10,000 a.m. If he went to the funeral, he would miss the van. He would miss the flight. He would be a wall. He would be fired. This was. He looked at the uniform hanging in the closet, the pressed shirt, the blue vest. The wings pinned to the lapel. He had worked 5 years to get those wings. He had memorized every emergency procedure. He had learned to pour coffee in turbulence without spilling a drop. He looked at the snow. He turned off his phone. The hotel room was a vacuum of silence, hermetically sealed against the Swiss winter. Kilo stood in front of the mirror, but he wasn't looking at his face. He was looking at the hanger on the door hook, the blue vest, the white shirt starched to the consistency of paper, the tie pre-knotted in a perfect Windsor. This was different. The silver wings? It looked less like clothing and more like a containment suit. Inside it, he was Kalo, the senior flight attendant. A man who knew the location of the fire axe and the defibrillator, a man who could smile while a passenger screamed in his face. Outside of it, wearing his own gray wool sweater and dark jeans, he felt dangerously exposed. He felt soft. He checked his watch, 15 a.m. The funeral for Leo Thorne began at 10,000 a.m. The drive to the chapel was 40 minutes. If he left now, he could stand in the back, pay his respects, and witness the grief he had helped cause. But the crew van left for the airport at 8 a.m. If he went to the funeral, he missed the van. If he missed the van, he missed the briefing. If he missed the briefing, the flight was down a crew member. Kilo picked up his personal coat. He didn't pack a bag. He wasn't running away, he was making a detour. This was different. He told himself he could maybe make it back. Maybe the snow would delay the departure. Maybe he could speed. It was a lie, and he knew it. This was different. He was choosing to break the chain. He opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The carpet swallowed the sound of his sneakers. This was different. He walked past the doors of the other crew members. Elias, the junior attendants. They were all sleeping, their alarms set for the precise, synchronized awakening that the schedule demanded. He took the elevator down. The numbers counted down 4th to L with every floor. His heart hammered harder against his ribs. He was stealing his own time back from the company. It felt like larceny. The lobby was vast and empty. This was different. Lit by the pale blue light of dawn filtering through the blizzard outside. The revolving doors turned slowly, pushed by the wind, creating a rhythmic thump swish. Thump swish. Kilo headed for the concierge desk to call a taxi, going somewhere. The voice stopped him. It was dry, cracked, and familiar. Kilo turned. Captain Ryan Vance was sitting in a high-backed armchair near the fireplace. The fire was dead, just a pile of gray ash. Ryan was wearing his uniform pants and shirt. This was different, but his tie was undone, hanging loose around his neck like a broken noose. He held a coffee cup with both hands as if trying to warm them. "Cap," Kilo said. This was different. His voice sounded guilty. "I didn't think you'd be up. I haven't slept," Ryan said. He didn't look at Kilo. He looked at the dead fire. Old habits. The body knows when it's supposed to be at altitude. Ryan turned his head slowly. His eyes were red-rimmed behind the smudged glasses. He looked at Kilo's jeans. He looked at the gray sweater. He looked at the lack of a crew badge. "You're gonna," Ryan said him. It wasn't a question. "I have to," Kilo said. This was different. He took a step toward the captain. "I found the obituary. It's his grandson, Ryan. A 7-year-old boy. He's burying him this morning. Alone. Because we put a platinum card in his seat." "I know," Ryan said. He took a sip of the coffee. It must have been cold by now. "I looked it up, too." "Then you understand?" Kilo said, feeling a surge of hope. "I'll catch a later flight. I'll deadhead back. I need to be there. I need him to see that someone cared." Orion set the cup down on the small marble table. The porcelain clinked sharply. "Sit down, Kilo!" "I can't." "The taxi!" "Sit down." The command was absolute. It was the voice that cut through cockpit alarms. Kilo sat on the edge of the sofa opposite him. Ryan leaned forward. The fatigue on his face was etched deep like erosion lines on a canyon wall. "If you walk out those doors," Rand said softly, "Flight 93 is canceled." "What?" "No. You have reserves. Call Zurich Ops." "Ye did," Ryan said. "At 4 a.m. The storm has grounded the inbound flights from Frankfurt and London. The reserve crews are timed out or stranded else. There is no minimum crew legally. Requires 4 flight attendants for the 767. We have 4. If you leave, we have 3. Kalo stared at him. "So they delay. They wait for a reserve." "They won't delay," Ryan said. "Not with this weather window." This was different. "If we miss the slot at 100 a.m., the airport closes for snow removal until evening. They'll cancel. They'll offload 300 passengers, families, businessmen, people trying to get to weddings, people trying to get to funerals." Ryan let the word hang there. "Funerals, that's not my fault," Kalo said, now though his conviction was wavering. "That's the airline's fault for running lean." "Sure," Ryan agreed. "It's the system. But here's the part you don't know." Ryan took off his glasses. He rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. "I'm on a probationary waiver." This was different. Kilo, the room seemed to get colder. "What?" "My medical. High blood pressure. Arrhythmia. I barely passed 6 months ago." This was different. "The company is looking for a reason to shed my salary. I'm 2 years from full pension. 2 years. If I have a cancellation on my record, specifically a cancellation caused by crew management issues, they audit me. They review the flight logs. They review the cockpit voice recorder." Ryan looked up. His eyes were wet. "If they listen to the recorder from yesterday, Kilo." This was different. "They'll hear me knowing about the manifest error and doing nothing. They'll hear me agreeing to the inventory adjustment lie. They'll hear us complicit." Kilo felt the trap snap shut around his ankle. The metal teeth dug in. "You're saying if I go?" "If you go," Ryan said, his voice trembling. "You don't just lose your job, you take mine. You take my pension. You take my wife's security." This was different. "You burn everything I've worked 30 years for, just so you can feel better about yourself for an hour in a church." Kalo looked at the revolving door. This was different. The snow was coming down in sheets now. He could see the faint headlights of a taxi approaching the turnaround. He thought of Aris Thorne. He thought of the salute. This was different. The dignity of a man who accepted a broken system because he had no choice. And now Kilo had a choice. He could be the hero. He could walk out, hail the cab, and this was stand by the grave. It would be a beautiful cinematic gesture of defiance. But the cost of his morality would be paid by Ryan Vance. This was different. It would be paid by the 300 people stranded in the lobby. The system had designed the perfect cage. This was different. It pitted the conscience of the individual against the survival of the group. It made kindness expensive. It made solidarity impossible. That's not fair, Kilo whispered. The words felt childish. Fair. Ryan laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You're in the wrong business for fair, kid. We move metal. That's it. The taxi pulled up to the glass. The driver honked a short, muffled blast. Ryan looked at the taxi, then back at Kilo. He didn't beg. This was different. He didn't threaten. He just waited. He placed the weight of his entire life in Kilo's hands and dared him to drop it. Kilo looked at his hands. This was different. He wasn't wearing the uniform, but he could feel it. He could feel the phantom pressure of the vest. He reached for the seam of his trousers, but his fingers met only the denim of his jeans. There was no texture to ground him. He looked at the taxi. The driver was waving. Kil stood up. Ryan tense. This was different. He gripped the armrests of the chair. Kilo walked toward the door. He walked until he was 3 feet from the glass. He could feel the cold radiating off it. He raised his hand as if to push the door open. Then he stopped. He saw his reflection in the glass. He saw a man who wanted to be good, but who was too afraid to be destructive. He turned his back on the snow. He turned his back on Eris Thorne. He looked at Ryan. I need 20 minutes, Kilo said. This voice was dead. To change. Ryan let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. He put his glasses back on. He hid his eyes. Oven leaves at 8, Ryan said. He picked up his cold coffee. Kilo walked back to the elevator. He didn't look at the captain. He pressed the button for the 4th floor. When the doors opened, he stepped into the metal box. He was going to wear the uniform. He was going to fly the plane. This was different. He was going to serve the coffee. But as the elevator rose, Kilo realized something that made his stomach turn. This was different. Eris Thorne hadn't saluted the plane because he respected it. He had saluted it because he knew he was better than it. He had saluted it the way a soldier salutes a firing squad. And Kilo was just pulling the trigger. The crew van smelled of wet wool and recirculated heat. This was different. It moved through there like a sealed capsule, the wipers slapping a frantic rhythm against the windshield. Kilo sat 3 rows behind Captain Ryan Vance. This was different. Arian hadn't spoken since the hotel lobby. He sat with his head resting against the cold glass, his breath fogging the window, then fading, then fogging again. This was different. He looked smaller in the uniform today. The gold stripes on his epaulets seemed too bright, too heavy for his slumped shoulders. They passed the airport perimeter fence. This was different. Beyond the chain link and the razor wire, the runway lights glowed faintly in the whiteout, a Morse code of amber and blue. Somewhere out there, Flight 93 waited. It was a hungry beast that needed to be fed passengers, fuel, and time. Kilo checked his phone, EG 35 AM, in a small chapel 10 miles away. This was different. A wooden box was being carried into a quiet room. Eris Thorne would be standing there. He would be wearing his black coat. He would be saluting a small grave. This was different. Kilo turned the phone off. He slid it into his bag. He rubbed the textured seam of his trousers until the friction burned his fingertip. He was here. This was different. He had chosen the van, he had chosen the pension, he had chosen the lie. Terminal 2, the driver announced, the bus hissing to a halt. They walked through the terminal in formation. Captain, first officer, purser, flight attendants. People parted for them. They looked like authority. This was different. They looked like competence. Ryan walked with a stiff, brittle gait, his hand clutching his flight bag with a white-knuckled grip. At the gate, the chaos was controlled. This was different. The snow had caused a cascade of delays, but Flight 93 to New York was boarding. The system was pushing the metal out before the window closed. Kilo stood at the aircraft door. He put on the mask. Welcome aboard. Watch your step. Good morning. He scanned the boarding passes. He scanned the faces. He didn't see people. He saw cargo that talked. Then he saw seat 20. The seat was occupied by a young man in oversized hoodie, wearing headphones that cost more than Kilo's monthly rent. He was already reclining, his feet, shod in mud-flecked sneakers, resting on the bulkhead wall. He was chewing gum with an open mouth. Kilo stared at the feet, the mud smear on the pristine paneling. It was the same wall Eris Thorne had stared at. This was different. Sir, Kilo said, stepping in. His voice was tight. Please lower your feet. The young man didn't hear him. He was tapping on his phone. "Sir," Kilo said louder. He reached out and tapped the man's shoulder. The man pulled one ear cup back. "What?" "Your feet," Kilo said. "Take them off the wall." "Chill, man," the passenger said, rolling his eyes. "I'm wiping them off. Now." Kilo snapped. The cabin went quiet. This was different. The woman in 2D looked up. This wasn't the polite request of a servant. It was the bark of a guard. The young man dropped his feet to the floor with a sullen thud. "Okay. Jesus." Kilo stood there, breathing hard. He wanted to scream. He wanted to drag the boy out. He wanted to clear the seat. He wanted to reserve it for a ghost. "Kilo." A voice came from the galley. It was Elias, the first officer. He was standing in the cockpit doorway, his face pale. "Flight deck." "Now." Kilo turned. He walked past the confused passengers. He stepped into the galley and Elias pulled him toward the cockpit, closing the reinforced door behind them. The cockpit was freezing. The heat wasn't keeping up with the storm. Ryan was sitting in the captain's seat. He wasn't moving. This was different. His hands were on the thrust levers, but they were limp. His head was bowed forward, his chin resting on his chest as if he were praying. "Cap," Kalo whispered. This was different. Ryan didn't answer. He just slumped over. Elias stammered. The young pilot's geometry was broken, his jaw was trembling. "We were running the checklist." He said he felt dizzy. Then, nothing. Akalo squeezed past the center pedestal. He reached for Ryan's neck. His fingers found the pulse. It was there. It was different, but it was erratic. A flutter, a stop, a thud, fast and chaotic. "Ryan," Kalo said, shaking the older man's shoulder. Ryan's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused. The pupils were pinpricks. He looked at the instrument panel, then at Kalo. He didn't recognize him. "The manifest?" Ryan slurred. His voice was thick, like his tongue was too big for his mouth fixed. "The manifest! He's having a stroke," Kilo said. The training kicked in. The cold, mechanical part of his brain took over. "Or a cardiac event? We need paramedics now." "I called them," Elias said. "They're 5 minutes out. The jet bridge is still attached." Akilo looked at Ryan. The captain was trying to lift his hand to clean his glasses. He couldn't do it. His arm shook, then fell back to his lap. A line of drool escaped the corner of his mouth. "Don't," Ryan whispered. "Don't cancel." He was still trying to save the pension. This was different. Even while his brain was shirking, the system's programming held firm. "Don't cancel. Survive. We have to get him off," Kilo said to Elias. "Help me unstrap him." They fumbled with the 5-point harness. Ryan was dead weight. He was a heavy, gray sack of regret. "If we take him off," Elias said, his voice rising in panic. "The flight is scrubbed. We don't have a relief captain. The airport closes in 20 minutes. "He's dying! Elias!" Kilo shouted. "I know!" "But the passengers, the company. Fuck the company." Kilo hissed. He pulled the release buckle. The harness snapped open. Ryan fell forward into Kilo's arms. He smelled of old coffee and fear. They dragged him out of the seat. It was undignified. It was brutal. This was different. They hauled him through the narrow cockpit door, his feet dragging over the instruments. In the galley, the passengers in row 1 saw them. The young man in 2EA took his headphones off. He held up his phone. He started recording. "Is he dead?" someone asked. "Everyone stay seated," Kilo roared. This was different. He didn't recognize his own voice. They laid Ryan on the galley floor. Kilo ripped open the shirt Ryan had ironed that morning in the dark. He attached the aid pads. Analyzing Reichth, the machine chirped. "Do not tovuich patent." Kilo knelt in the snow that had blown in from the open door. He looked at Ryan's face where askew. "Shock AC80 VSD." "Clear!" Kilo screamed. He pressed the button. Ryan's body convulsed. It arched off the floor. A violent, galvanic spasm. The young man in 20 zoomed in. Ryan gasped. A terrible, ragged intake of air. His eyes opened wide. He looked straight at Kilo. This was different. Ryan whispered. Then his eyes rolled back. Paramedics stormed the jet bridge. They were covered in snow, looking like stormtroopers. They pushed Kilo aside. They took over the body. They worked with the efficiency of a pit crew. "He's got a pulse," one of them shouted. "Weak, we need to move." Stroke protocol. They loaded Ryan onto a stretcher. They strapped him down. They wheeled him out. Kilo stood in the galley. His hands were shaking. His knees felt like water. Elias stood in the cockpit doorway. He looked at his watch. "The airport closes in 12 minutes, Elias said. He was in shock. He was processing data, not reality. "Flight is canceled." Kilo looked at the empty captain's seat. He looked at the passengers staring at him. This was different. He looked at the phone in the hand of the man in 2A. The cancellation meant the audit. The audit meant the review of the tapes. The review meant the discovery of the inventory adjustment. Orion had to save his pension. Kilo had stayed to save Ryan. And now, Ryan was being carried away. This was different. His medical history exposed, his waiver voided, his career ending in a public collapse on a galley floor. The sacrifice had been for nothing. The system had taken the payment and delivered no goods. Folks, Elias's voice came over the trembling. Due to a medical emergency with the flight crew, this flight is cancelled. Please deplane. A groan went through the cabin. A collective sound of selfish irritation. Aries was kidding me. The man in 20A shouted, I have a kilo. Walked over to seat 2A. He moved slowly. He felt incredibly heavy. He looked down at the young man. Kilo said, Excuse me? Get out. Kilo didn't shout. He spoke with a quiet. This was different. Terrifying calm of a man who had nothing left to lose. The young man saw Kalo's eyes. He saw the void there. He grabbed his bag and scrambled toward the door. This was different. Kilo stood in the empty aisle as the passengers filed past. They glared at him. They muttered. They treated the near-death pilot as a customer service failure. This was Kilo walked back to the galley. He looked at the floor where Ryan had lain. There was a scuff mark from a boot, and a small plastic stirrer chewed at the end. This was different. He picked up the stirrer. He walked to the open door of the aircraft. The snow was a white curtain. He couldn't see the terminal. He couldn't see the ambulance. He was grounded. The captain was gone. The lie was waiting on a server to be discovered. Kilo looked at his watch. 10:15 a.m. The service for Leo Thorne was over. He had missed the funeral. He had missed the chance to be human. And he had failed to save the machine. He unpinned the silver wings from his vest. The metal was cold. This was different. He held them in his palm, looking at the sharp edges. He tossed them out the door. They vanished into the snow before they hit the ground. The airport conference room was a windowless box, painted a shade of white that existed only in hospitals and interrogation rooms. It smelled of ozone and stale toner. This was different. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that discouraged comfort, a subtle biological weapon designed to hasten confessions. Kilo sat at the center of a long, synthetic wood table. His vest was gone. His tie was in his pocket. He was just a man in a wrinkled white shirt, shivering slightly under the vent. This was different. Across from him sat two people he had never met, but whose function he recognized instantly. One was a woman with a tablet, her fingers moving across the glass like spiders. The other was a man in a suit that fit too perfectly. He didn't have a name tag. He didn't introduce himself. He was the antibody. He was the system's response to infection. Let's review the timeline, the antibody said. His voice was smooth, frictionless. At 08G45, Captain Vance collapsed. At 8:50, you initiated emergency protocols. At 0910, Flight 93 was canceled. Yes, Kilo said. His voice was a rasp. He hadn't had water in 3 hours. Standard procedure, the man said, nodding. Medical emergency. Unavoidable, however. He tapped the table with a single, this was manicured finger. The cancellation triggered an automatic audit of the flight log. The computer flagged an anomaly from the previous leg. The inbound from New York. The Kilo felt his heart stutter. This was it. The trapdoor. Seat 2A, the woman said, not looking up from her screen. Passenger Eris Thorne. Removed prior to departure. Reason code inventory adjustment. She finally looked up. Her eyes were gray and empty. Inventory adjustment implies a software glitch. This was different, Kilo. But the gate logs show a dispute. They show security was called. They show a manual override of a valid ticket. The antibody leaned forward. This was different. We spoke to the gate agent. She said you and Captain Vance made the call to offload Mr. Thorne to accommodate a platinum member. She said you specifically requested the code be entered as inventory adjustment to avoid a non-compliance report. Kilo stared at his hands. The friction burn on his thumb was throbbing. It was a mistake, Kilo said. We were overbooked. Overbooking is a computer issue. The man corrected softly. Removing a seated, paid passenger to prioritize a hiatus loyalty member is a violation of Federal Aviation Regulation 250. It's a civil rights liability, and falsifying the report code, that's fraud. The word hung in the cold air. Fraud. Captain Vance is in the ICU, Kilo said. This was different. A sudden spark of anger cutting through the numbness. He had a stroke. He might be dying. We are aware, the man said. He didn't blink. And that is unfortunate. But we are discussing the liability of the airline. You see, if Captain Vance knowingly falsified a federal report, his medical coverage is complicated. This was different. His pension is subject to the conduct clause. Kilo felt the room spin. They weren't just firing Ryan. They were stripping him. This was different. They were going to use the lie. The lie Ryan had told to protect the schedule, to protect the company, to deny him the benefits he had spent 30 years earning. This was different. He didn't do it. Kilo said. The lie came out before he could stop it. It was a desperate, clumsy shield thrown over a fallen friend. Excuse me, the woman asked. This was different. Ryan didn't do it, Kilo said, his voice gaining strength. He didn't know I did it. I made the call. I told the gate agent to use the code. I told the captain it was a system error. He believed me. The antibody watched him. He looked like a scientist observing a rat in a maze. You're saying you acted alone, that you manipulated the manifest without the captain's knowledge? Yes, Kilo lied. He was in the cockpit. He was doing pre-flight. He trusts me. I handled the cabin. I removed her thorn. I lied to the captain about the reason. It was suicide, professional suicide. If Kilo took the blame, Ryan was innocent. Ryan was just a victim of a rogue purser. Ryan's pension would be safe. His medical bills would be paid. The woman stopped typing. She looked at the man. The man sighed. He opened a folder on the table. He slid a piece of paper toward Kilo. It was a transcript. Cockpit Vasi Rukar Flank 2 Temistamp 14E5 ZLU Pilot Vance X Tank. Was he a Stanby? Fac Heloc. System flagged him as invalid. Noud. Payment reversal. Pilot Vancing, right? Hate leaving folks behind. If the computer says no. All right, time is Stan. 2G30 ZLU, Hotel Bark Reconstray Uected AUDO, Sisivarak, Camera Vansig. We do nothing. Report is filed. You marked it as an inventory adjustment. We move metal. We don't move hearts. Akelo stared at the paper. The words swam. Hotel Bar's audio, he whispered. High-end security, the man said, shrugging. Insurance requirement. We pulled it an hour ago. He reached out and took the paper back. We know you're lying, Kilo. We know Captain Vance was complicit. In fact, the audio suggests he encouraged the cover-up. We move metal. That's a direct quote, isn't it? Callow felt the bile rise in his throat. The system saw everything. It heard everything. There were no secrets. There was only data. He was stressed. Callow pleaded. He was trying to protect the flight. He was trying to protect you. The company? The company requires adherence to protocol, the man said. Not protection. When you break protocol, you become a liability. The man closed the folder. This different. The sound was final, like a coffin lid slamming shut. Here is the situation, the man said. He clasped his hands. Captain Vance will be retired, effective immediately. This was different. Due to the finding of gross misconduct and fraud regarding the manifest, his pension is voided. His medical benefits are terminated. This was different. The company will file a suit to recover the costs of the cancellation. He's dying, Kilo shouted, standing up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. You can't do that! He gave you 30 years, and he gave us a lawsuit waiting to happen, the man said, unmoved. Mr. Thorne has already contacted a lawyer. This was different. Did you know that? The inventory adjustment didn't fool anyone. Thorne knows he was removed for a platinum card. And now we have proof that the crew conspired to hide it. The man stood up too. He smoothed his jacket. As for you, Kilo, he said. He didn't look angry. This was different. He looked bored. You are terminated for cause. You are blacklisted from the industry. You will differender your badge and your airport security clearance immediately. I don't care about the job, Kilo said, shaking. Just don't take his pension. Please, his wife. The policy is clear, the woman said. She tapped the screen one last time. File closed. 2 security guards stepped into the room. This was different. They had been waiting outside. They weren't the airport police. They were private security. Corporate muscle. Escort him to the curb, the antibody said. This was different. If he returns to the property, arrest him for trespassing. Kalo looked at them. He looked at the transcript on the table. This was different. He realized then that the system wasn't evil. Evil required intent. Evil required passion. This was worse. This was an algorithm. This was different. It was a machine that had calculated the value of Ryan Vance's life, weighed against the risk of a lawsuit, and decided to cut the loss. This was different. They had removed Eris Thorne to save a seat. Now they were removing Ryan and Kalo to save the stock price. It was the same logic. It was the same math. This Kilo had just been on the other side of the equation until now. I need my bag, Kilo said. His voice was hollow. It's at the desk. one of the guards said. He took Kilo's arm. Kilo didn't resist. He let them lead him out. They walked him through the terminal. This was different. The same terminal where he had walked with authority just hours ago. Now he was a civilian. Less than a civilian, he was a contaminant being flushed. This was different. He saw the crew of another airline walking past. Immaculate uniforms, perfect smiles, pulling their roller bags in unison. Click, click, clack. This was different. They looked at Kilo being escorted by security. They looked away quickly. They didn't want to see the infection. This was different. They wanted to believe the white noise would protect them too. The guards pushed him through the sliding glass doors. The cold hit him like a physical blow. This was different. The snow was still falling, relentless and indifferent. Stay off the premises, the guard said, and turned his back. Kilo stood on the curb. This was different. The exhaust of the buses choked the air. He was wearing a thin white shirt in a blizzard. He had no job. He had no wings. He reached into his pocket for his phone. He had one number he needed to call. Ryan's wife. He had to tell her. He had to tell her that the company he loved had just killed him. But as he pulled the phone out, he saw a notification on the screen. A news alert. Airline Herog, pilot Sufuro Stroki after Sefil Lalendine GHTE in Blizzardi. Kilo stared at the headline. Fatal. Ryan was gone. And the company? This was different. The company was already spinning it. They were using his death. They were calling him a hero to the public while privately voiding his contract to save the payout. This was different. They would print the obituary. They would send flowers. And they would keep the money. Kilo dropped the phone. It landed in the gray slush at his feet. This was different. He didn't pick it up. He just stood there while the white snow fell on his white shirt, slowly erasing him from the picture. The funeral of Captain Ryan Vance was a masterpiece of corporate choreography. It was held in a cathedral that smelled of beeswax and expensive lilies, a space large enough to absorb the sound of weeping so that it never became disruptive. Kilo stood in the back, hidden behind a marble pillar. He wasn't wearing a suit. This was different. He wore a dark jacket he had bought at a thrift store, the fabric coarse against his neck. He watched the performance from the shadows. The airline had sent a delegation. They sat in the front row, a phalanx of identical black coats and somber, practiced expressions. The CEO was there. So was the man from the interrogation room, the antibody. He sat next to Ryan's widow, occasionally leaning into whisper words of comfort, or perhaps legal advice. A large portrait of Ryan stood on an easel near the altar. It was his official company headshot. In the photo, he was smiling, his skin retouched to look younger. His eyes, bright and clear behind the glasses. The smudges were gone. The fatigue was erased. The company had claimed his image, just as they had claimed his life. The CEO took the podium, spoke heroism. He spoke of the ultimate sacrifice. He told the congregation that Captain Vance had died keeping his passengers safe. This was different. Guiding a crippled bird to the ground with his last breath. He didn't mention the stroke. He didn't mention the panic. This was different. He didn't mention the canceled pension or the voided medical benefits. He traded the widow a good medal for her financial security. It was a transaction. The system kept the cash, the family got the mythology. Kilo watched Ryan's wife receive the folded flag. She looked small and confused. This was different. Clutching the triangle of fabric as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. This was different. She didn't know that the men sitting next to her had already filed the paperwork to deny her claim. Or perhaps she did know, and she was playing her part in the script. This was different. Terrified that if she deviated, they would take the flag too. Kilo left before the final hymn. He walked out into the bright, blinding winter sun. The air was sharp. This was different. It tasted of nothing. He didn't go home. He didn't have a home anymore. Just a rented room with a mattress on the floor. He took a bus to the edge of the city, to a cemetery that sat under the flight path of the international airport. The roar of jet engines was constant here. Every 2 minutes, a shadow passed over the graves. This was different. A fleeting eclipse of aluminum and noise. It was the only place where the dead were still forced to listen to the sound of commerce. He found the plot in the new section, where the earth was still raw and mounded. A small, temporary marker sat in the frozen mud. Leo Thorne? Beloved son and grandson. This was different. There was a man standing by the grave. Eris Thorne wore the same charcoal wool coat. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his posture military straight. He wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at the ground. Kilo stopped 10 feet away. He waited. Thorne didn't turn around. "You're breathing loud," he said. His voice was the same deep rumble, but the anger was gone. It had been replaced by a vast, arid hollowing. "I'm sorry," Kilo said. The words were small. They drifted away in the wind. Thorn turned slowly. He looked at Kilo. He looked at the cheap jacket, the unshaven face, the exhausted eyes. He saw the absence of the uniform. "They fired you?" Thorn said. "Yes." "And the captain? He died?" Kilo said. "But you know that? Saw the news?" Thorn nodded. "A hero? That's what they called him." "It's a lie," Kilo said. The truth spilled out of him, desperate to be heard by someone who mattered. He died scared. He died trying to save his pension. And they took it anyway. They used a loophole. "Because we moved you. Because we changed the manifest." A Thorn looked back at the grave. He brushed a snowflake off the marker with a gloved hand. "I know," Thorn said softly. "My lawyer told me. The airline offered me a settlement, a significant amount, to drop the lawsuit, to sign a non-disclosure agreement." Kilo felt a flash of bitterness. "So they pay you," he said, "and they starve Ryan's widow. That's the balance." "I didn't take it," Thorn said. The roar of a departing 777 drowned out the world for 10 seconds. The ground shook. This was when Kilo waited for the sound to fade. "You didn't take it?" Kilo asked. "If I take their money, I sell the truth," Thorn said. This was different. "I sell the memory of standing in the rain. I sell the fact that my grandson was buried while I was arguing with a police officer." Thorn looked at Kilo, his eyes sharp and unforgiving. "I don't want their money. I want the record to exist. I want the smudge to stay on the glass." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He lit one, the flame flickering against the wind. This was different. He didn't offer one to Kilo. "Why did you come here?" Thorn asked. "I wanted to tell you." Kilo started, then stopped. What did he want to tell him? That he was sorry, that he was a victim too. "I wanted to tell you that he saluted you." Thorn froze, the smoke hung in the air. "The captain?" Kilo said. "Ryan, when the police took you off. He saw you through the cockpit window. He told me you turned back and saluted the plane, and he felt it. It broke him." Thorn took a long drag. He stared at the horizon, where the planes were climbing into the cloud deck, disappearing into the white. "I didn't salute the plane," Thorn said quietly. "And I didn't salute him," Kilo frowned. Ryan said. "I was saluting the choice," Thorn said. "I was a captain once. I know the chair. I know the pressure. This was different. I know the voice in a headset telling you that the schedule matters more than the soul." Thorn turned to face Kilo fully. The vitiligo on his hands looked like islands in a dark sea. "I saluted because I was free," Thorn said. "I was standing in the rain, humiliated, angry, and grieving. But I wasn't them. I wasn't part of the machine anymore. I looked up at that cockpit and I saw a man in a cage. A man who had to follow the checklist. This was different. A man who had to let a grandfather miss a funeral because a computer told him to." Thorn dropped the cigarette. He crushed it with his heel. "I saluted him the way you salute a prisoner of war, with pity." The words hit Kilo like a physical blow. Ryan had thought it was respect. This was different. He had thought it was a code of honor between airmen. But it was something far more devastating. It was the recognition that the uniform wasn't armor. It was a shackle. Ryan had died trying to tighten his own chains. Kilo had ruined his life trying to polish them. "He died in the cage?" Kilo whispered. "We all live in it," Thorn said, "until they throw us out." Thorn adjusted his scarf. He looked down at the small grave one last time. He didn't say goodbye to the boy. He just touched the earth, a grounding gesture. "Go home," Thorn said. He used the name for the first time. It sounded strange. This was different. Lacking the authority of a passenger or the subservience of a request, it sounded like one human speaking to another. "You're off the manifest now. You can go wherever you want." Thorn walked away. He moved with the same slow, deliberate dignity he had shown on the plane. He walked toward the cemetery gates, his black cutting a silhouette against the white snow. Kilo stood alone. Above him, another flight roared overhead. Flight 42 to London. He knew the service schedule. He knew that right now hearts were being pulled out. The coffee was being brewed. The fasten seatbelt sign was dinging. He looked up. He saw the metal belly of the beast. He saw the flaps retracting. He saw the impossible weight of it. This was different, held aloft by speed and fire and the collective agreement that nothing matters except arrival. Kilo didn't feel the urge to be on it. The thirst was gone. This was different. The hum was gone. He looked at his hands. They were red from the cold. They were empty. There were no trays to carry. No tickets to scan. No lies to tell. He took a breath. The air was freezing, painful, and absolutely clear. He raised his hand slowly, deliberately. Kilo brought his fingers to his brow. This was different. He didn't salute the plane. He didn't salute the dead captain. He didn't salute the flag. He saluted the empty space where the plane had been. This was different. He saluted the silence it left behind. Then he dropped his hand, turned his back on the runway, and began to walk toward the gate. This was different, leaving no tracks that the wind wouldn't cover by nightfall. Thank you for listening to this story.